What's unique to one age group? Kathy?
Change or improve the music of the church.
So under 35 years, change and improve the music of the church to deepen worship experience. Any other uniques?
Expand the international mission of the church.
Expand the international mission of the church with both financial resources and personal involvement. Those are unique to folks under 35.
Now, one question I had when I look at page 26 that tells our demographic data, only 3% of the survey respondents fall in that age group.
Which is only about 5 people.
So this is the opinion of 5 people.
Right.
So just...
That's going to be important. That's an important data point. Thank you for bringing it up. It's going to be even more important in a minute. Because we're going to see this same data represented in another way that, for a lot of churches, makes them panic a little bit.
So,
any other uniques?
Yeah. Under the 65 plus,
Uh-huh.
work as an advocate for social and institutional change so that society might better reflect the values of the kingdom.
Okay. Work as an advocate for social and institutional change so that society might better reflect the values of the kingdom of God.
The 35 to 64, those are shared.
They share all of them.
Yeah.
Okay. So the asterisk ones are stop and look priorities, okay? Because those are broad, they cross all the age demographics. So those are important to pay attention to. Circle, star, ask more questions about, create events where you can do listening sessions around, new people. So one of the things that you can do around new people is that you can have a town meeting. Everybody comes together and you have lunch, and then you have a consultant like me teach some concepts around gathering new people into a community. And then you can have everybody do some assessment of how good you are at different pieces of that, like invite, greet, orient, incorporate. And then kind of have a conversation about what might be some next steps. You can have events like that that gather data and get more people in the conversation. You might find out that this is a priority that everybody has, but they're not that worried about it. That they're actually not super anxious about it, but it's a priority. You might find that out. Or you might find out that there is a lot of anxiety about it. So that'd be an example of something you'd do. If it's unique, you might want to have an event for that group where you have some conversation about those things. Or if it's just 5 people that filled it out, you might want to have a more general event that tries to engage more folks in that group on some of these questions. Alrighty, page 10. This separates people out in a different way. Infrequent attenders, less than once per month, and more frequent attenders, once per month or more. In a little bit, we're going to call them by different names. We're going to say that infrequent attenders are backdoor people, and frequent attenders are front door people. Okay. Folks who attend more may have different priorities than those who attend less. Again, let's ask the question, what's common to both groups? What do you see?
Incorporation, 59. And life's broken by life circumstances, 65.
That's interesting, huh?
66.
Yeah.
51, 59, 66, and 65.
Yeah. Priorities that are unique to infrequent attendees, unique to the backdoor folks, those priorities may indicate reasons they have become inactive. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Making necessary changes to attract families with children and youth to our church. On a visceral level, that raises more questions than it answers for me. Because I walked in here today and I was almost bowled over by about 10 kids, right? And what I noticed when that happened, I mean, they were all over the stairwells and everything. What I noticed when that happened is that I was surprised not at all, right? I thought, oh, I'm at St. Andrews, right? And so I see this and it's like, interesting, necessary changes to attract families with children and youth to our church. There are a ton of children and youth here. So what might that data mean? You're not going to know unless you ask. But you can hypothesize. Is it too chaotic? I'm making this up. Is it too chaotic for some people who are less frequent attenders with small kids? Are there things that their kids need that we don't know about? These are good questions. The fact that you have a bunch of kids doesn't necessarily mean that you're rocking it, right? Because there might be some folks who are attending less often because what they need for their kid is not happening. Right? What's the other one that's unique? Work to renew and revitalize building coalitions with partners who share this vision and commitment. Okay, community around the church. So that was question number 64. It's hard to know what that even means, right? Work to renew and revitalize the community around the church by building coalitions with partners that share this vision and commitment. What's your hunch on what that means for you?
That means let the people, let's say in a 4-block, 5-block radius know what we're doing here.
4-block, 5-block radius?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like down to
Or connecting with other churches in the neighborhood, you know,
Mhm.
that type of thing.
because we used to have a really strong connection with Bethany, but not so much since Dennis
Right.
left.
Okay, so is it about this 4 and 5-block neighborhood? Is it about churches in this neighborhood? Is it about our past relationship with churches in this neighborhood, which has shifted? The thing is, we don't know what was in their mind when they answered this, when they identified this as a priority. We can have some good hunches. My guess is that those are pretty good hunches of what was in their mind. You know, you guys didn't just make that up. And you come here and you're a leader here. So you're probably pretty close to what they were thinking when they filled this out. But you might want to have more conversation with folks. Also, here's something to keep in mind is that further conversation doesn't have to be formal.
Right.
You can go away from this, Kat, and you can ask questions in informal contexts, in staff meetings, at coffee hour. You can go out to coffee with someone who's in a demographic that you're interested in and ask them some of these questions. It doesn't all have to be formal and planned. So some of this stuff can be takeaways that you just sort of go forward with in this kind of spirit of curiosity. Okay. Alrighty. We're making our way in the USA. The next page explains the page that follows it, so I'm going to have you skip page 11 because I just want to walk you through the bubble page. This page would be a lot more fun if it were printed in color, and I'll show you. Thank you, Kathy, for your patience with me on that. I'm not keeping up on the laptop. Yeah, and let's view this. Okay. This is the same data on priorities, but in another way to look at it. Especially good for visual learners, people who like to look at shapes and colors to process numbers. So it just kind of makes the symbols a little more user-friendly for some of us. We're on page 12. So here's where people panic. They look and they see that music is a very big deal for people under 35. And they see a lot of dissatisfaction in that big bubble, right? But that's not the only thing that's being said here. Because as you let your eye go to the right on music, what do you see?
Is that it's even, right?
What do folks see on the music line? All the other bubbles are pretty tiny.
Yeah, it's not a big deal for them.
So most people are not reporting music as an issue that needs a lot of development and change. Or they're not reporting that music is a major priority. They're not telling you that God is calling us into a new future with music. Okay? But the folks under 35 are. And it could be a mistake to overfunction on that. You may want to stay in dialogue with that group about what they meant by that. And you might want to just have some more conversation. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's a priority for them. It may not be a deal breaker. Nikki.
Is the size, I looked on that page before and I don't think it said, is the size a percentage of the respondents?
So, what are you
Like,
asking?
is the size of the bubble the percentage of respondents?
So, the larger the bubble, the more important the goal
So the more important.
for those respondents.
To more people, or?
So that bubble is saying that for folks under 35, music was identified as a high priority. Is that making sense?
And there were only 5 of them or something. that
Yeah.
you said.
Right, so yeah, I guess my question is, so let's not take that group, let's take a different group. So because, I mean, it's basically about that, but the larger the bubble, is it,
The larger the bubble is the
more people
closer to
said
5.
fives.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for like music, I mean, probably all 5 of them
Said something in the
said 5,
neighborhood of
you know,
5. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And I don't want to discount that, I just want to sort of put it in context. I mean, I think,
Yeah.
I look at this and say we need more information, period, from that
Yeah.
group.
Well,
Our
one way that I look at this is I'm glad you asked that, because one way that I look at this is folks under 35 tended to be more extreme in their responses overall. Their priorities were much clearer. You know, they were more willing to score high on stuff they cared about.
And I guess
Yeah.
the reason I was asking is a percentage, I would sort of also look at it a different way, because if there's only 5 of them, 4 of them is 80%, whereas if there's
Right.
100 people in your group, 80 of them are 80%.
Right.
And so each person's opinion and thoughts
Mhm.
counts more when it's a very small group.
True. That's true too.
Yeah. So again, I'm not trying to discount them, I just want to make sure I'm
Yeah.
understanding.
Yeah. This is good to talk this through, because the big bubbles can scare people. Or they can lead us into erroneous conclusions.
So, infrequent is infrequent attenders, but backdoor is different?
So backdoor is infrequent
But
attenders.
there's
Backdoor is shorthand for folks who come less than once a month.
But those are
there's a column
different.
for both.
I
There's a
thought
column
backdoor
for
was
both.
people who've come in the last 3 years.
So why is that?
I thought I saw it.
I'm sorry. Forgive me. This is my error.
Oh yeah, backdoor is different.
Here's what is meant by backdoor, front door. I conflated that data. There are infrequent attendees and frequent attendees. Backdoor means they are worshiping less often than they were worshiping
Oh,
3 years ago.
got it.
Sorry, this is a
Okay, less often.
subtlety I overlooked. Front door means they're worshiping more now than they were 3 years ago. Sorry about that. So infrequent, frequent measures how frequently they worship. Backdoor, front door compares their worship pattern now to their own worship pattern 3 years ago.
Okay.
So I could be a frequent, I could be a frequent backdoor person. I'm worshiping fairly frequently now, but I was even more
It's frequent.
excited 3 years ago. Yeah.
And the 10.
So, frequent, infrequent from the description has a, is clearly you're one or the other. Back door, front door, what, was there an option to say I'm worshiping the same amount, and are they in
Yes.
either of those groups, or are they not in either of those groups then? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So is there like a group that's,
That's the second question I don't know the answer to.
okay, I won't ask any more questions.
Well, no, I'm not sure exactly,
Okay.
like, I don't know if,
Or are they just not on the list at all?
I
they
think
may,
they're not on the list.
well, they're on the list according to age demographic,
Right, and according to frequent or infrequent.
And frequent,
right.
infrequent.
They're just not in.
but they may not show up in the bubbles
And that's
for
fine.
back door, front door, yeah. Okay,
So I just find something interesting here that the people that are worshiping less have a bigger bubble around pastoral care, which makes me wonder if one of the reasons why they're worshiping less is because something has happened. So they're not able to, for some.
possibly.
Mhm.
And again, your fourth priority is, working with people who are in broken circumstances. So you may want to formulate some questions about that. Yeah. All right. Let's press forward to page 13. Let's turn to the indices. Okay. So basically, what we're looking at is descriptive indices. That is to say, they are not value-based. Do you prefer flora or fauna? Do you have blue eyes or brown eyes? Okay. If you fall on one side of that or the other, it's okay. They are psychological opposites, not logical opposites. Right? So in a descriptive index, we're looking at people descriptively, but not evaluating. So it's not that, this is not a measurement of health or vitality or strength. It's a measurement of preference. Okay? And as we look at this, like this is a theological perspective index. Again, theological perspective is not necessarily a driver of satisfaction or energy, but it can give us some information about strengths and weaknesses if you're trying to grow. And I'll show you how that works in a minute. Okay? So there are 4 questions that the Theological Perspective Index is measuring, and they're listed there. And what it shows you is the response percentages, so this is kind of the raw data, and then it compares you to other churches who have taken this instrument. And what do you see? Very progressive theological perspective. Highly progressive. Okay.
So what are those dark squares? Is that,
So the bar graph on the bottom
yeah,
is comparing you with other churches that have taken this assessment. And what it's saying is that you are on the high end of more progressive theological perspective. Okay?
I get that, but what do the boxes specifically mean? Like, is that a percentage? Are these 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Okay, I'm sorry, I should have counted without
Okay.
asking.
So let's just...
Yes, it's a percentage.
So here's what it says. Compared with other churches, your theological diversity is low.
Right.
Okay? And I look at this and that doesn't surprise me. And what that is saying is a very progressive theological stance and attitude here, and an openness to ideas. This sound, one of the things that I see here is Episcopal. Okay? I wouldn't expect an Episcopal church in Seattle to really be on the right side of this index. Would you? I might see an Episcopal Church in Moses Lake further along on the right side, or even Greater Seattle. But generally, you're not going to see super conservative theological perspective here at St. Andrews. But here's one thing that you might miss, is that diversity of theological perspective is low. And that might make it hard to grow. And it might not. You know, you want to think about that and discern about that. If there's not a lot of room for theological diversity, for the contrary thought. So just an example from out of my hat is another deacon in our diocese, Richard Buer, who is openly gay and opened a dialogue with people who are very upset about the ordination of Gene Robinson as bishop in New Hampshire. He wanted to talk to people who were upset by that, right? And so what he wanted to experiment just as one person is a little bit of theological diversity. He wanted to be open to that as a person. And you don't have to do that as a congregation. You don't have to do anything with this data if you don't want. But one way to look at this data is it might be a factor in, it might be a ceiling on growth for you. It might not. But it's interesting data to have and to chew on. Again, you don't have to worry too much about it in a sense that it's not typically a driver of satisfaction and energy, but there it is. Okay? More conservative churches have a tougher time with conflict in general, especially if they have low tolerance scores. One way to look at this is your tolerance for non-progressive theology is low. Okay? But again, there's no correlation with satisfaction or energy, so you don't necessarily have to worry about it if that's what your focus is. And it could be that that's what your gift is. So you want to be careful before you don't run with scissors on some of this stuff, okay? All right. Flexible style. How flexible is St. Andrews at making changes and adjustments in how it goes about its ministry? The more flexible you are, the more adaptable you are to contexts that you're serving in or the community. The less flexible, the more likely it is to believe that a particular style is central to your identity. Okay. Again, sometimes our gift becomes our Achilles heel. Right? And we'll talk about that again in a minute. But as you see, very far on the adaptable side. Generally, a very positive attitude about change. Compared to other churches, a highly adaptable style and approach to things. If it doesn't work, let's change it. That can sometimes get in your way when you have to make a hard decision, or when you have to articulate who you are or what you believe. Sometimes highly adaptable people or congregations try to be all things to all people, and they get into traps with that. Very settled churches, churches that are really low on this measure, tend to have low morale. Okay. So this is a good sign. It's another sign of health for you. And then we come to page 15, which is another one of my favorites, just because it gives you a good visual. And a little bit lower, you can see that you are in the quadrant that is called Magi. Very grand, right? The other three quadrants are performance, hearth and home, and paraclete. And this is a descriptive map
Are those here?
Yeah.
about your theology, your theological perspective, and your adaptability.
Oh, I see.
And so you are, I don't know if it says those 4 words on
It
your sheet.
doesn't.
Okay, I had to look them up.
Okay.
So Magi is the upper left. What characterizes Magi in the Bible?
Searching.
Searching, seeking, on the journey, discovering. They're articulate, they're learned, they're intelligent, they like the life of the mind. They're in relationship with the stars and the created order of things. The center at St. Andrews is a pretty good indicator that you're in the Magi quadrant, right? Paraclete is right below you, settled and progressive. I have a hunch about the congregation I'm assigned to around Paraclete. Paraclete, a word for spirit. It's a church word, it's an insider word. Most normal people don't know that word. Paraclete, the comforter, the advocate. So they're more settled. They have a comforter vibe that you might fall short on St. Andrews. And also an advocacy energy. So paraclete would be below you, settled and progressive. To your right is performance, highly adaptable but conservative. So you see some of these churches where their theology, their theological perspective is much more conservative than St. Andrews, but they're very adaptable. Sometimes they make it into the news, right? The mega churches. And then hearth and home, conservative and settled. Country church. My grandmother's church, that kind of vibe or that energy. Okay. Now, all 4 of these different types of churches have great gifts and strengths, and then they also have a shadow or a challenge. For Magi churches, the 2 are, sometimes you can be so open that it's hard to say, this is who we are, or this is where we're going. Okay? And that can hamper your growth. One of the things that we're doing on a diocesan level, and if you were at convention, you saw this happen, they talk about elevator speeches. Can you say in 30 seconds why you are a Christian or why you are an Episcopalian? Can you say in 30 seconds why you're at St. Andrews? It might be hard if you're a Magi church to do that. And that may be off-putting to people because they just don't know who you are, right? And the second thing is you may over-intellectualize issues. In your discovery, on your journey, you may not be in touch with some of the feelings and emotions and the heart of what's going on for you. I won't get lost in an example, but when I went to New Orleans, we were rehabbing houses in the 9th Ward, and then we'd reflect in the evenings. And the evenings seemed to be the hardest part of the day for us. We're hanging sheetrock in 90-degree humid weather, but reflecting on what comes up for us emotionally was sometimes harder, right? And so that's just a thing to think about. You could also, when you're designing listening processes during this time, you could pay attention to that. You could give time for silence, time for one-on-one conversation. You could ask feeling questions. This is why, when we started, I said, say your name and one reason why St. Andrews is on your heart. Did that on purpose. Because you fall into this Magi quadrant, which is great, except for the shadow. Right? Okay. And then the next page is a little dashboard. We're going to move past it because I want to get us through the performance indices. Now we're on to logical opposites as opposed to psychological opposites. That is to say, there's good and bad, strong and weak, healthy and unhealthy. Okay? And so the dashboard is what it sounds like. It just kind of gives you a quick glance at how things are looking. And your needles look pretty good, right? Not a big surprise at this point in our talk. There's one needle that's bending the other way. Which one is it? Spiritual vitality. Also not a big surprise at this point. So we can start to put things together now. That your priorities include one around brokenness in your life and a desire that people have around getting in touch with their own brokenness. There's that data point. You can draw a line from that to some desire, especially in some of the folks in middle age, around pastoral care. There are concerns being expressed or priorities being expressed around making an environment that's more conducive to children and families, and yet there's a ton of kids here. So there's a little cognitive dissonance there, and so it makes me ask questions around, you know, are there quiet things or introverted things that kids need that are a priority for some of your folks, and it's hard for them to articulate it to themselves, let alone to you. You can start to put these kinds of things together, right? Spiritual vitality might be an issue. So as you move through the performance indices, the first one is hospitality. Okay. And generally this is a basic. People expect this at a church. So you're not going to get strongly disagree in any kind of high numbers. Bless you. Okay. So the questions that are being measured here are listed there. Our church welcomes and is enriched by persons from many different walks of life. Being part of this church has given me a new meaning to my life. Friendly atmosphere, an atmosphere of genuine care and concern. That's different than friendly. Y'all know about the Seattle Freeze, right? A kind of shallow friendliness, and then when I'm in big trouble, I might not have a friend in Seattle. That's a kind of Pacific Northwest vibe. Members in our church have been prepared to personally welcome guests in worship services. So the strongly disagree numbers are really low, which is where that belongs. Most people are not going to have a real problem with hospitality and still be taking your survey, right? Because it's a basic. If you guys are crappy at this, you're gonna have you're gonna just have a hard time getting people to even cooperate with the survey itself. So what you want to do is you want to look at the fences or see areas where people might be like, I'm not sure, okay? And what do you see? Generally, your percentiles are in the middle high range. You're doing pretty well on these measures relative to other churches. Question number 5 is interesting. That's the low liar, right? Mm-hmm. Question number 5, members in our church have been prepared to personally welcome guests in worship services. So that's interesting. There's a little gap there. In the event I described a little while back where you talk about invite, greet, orient, incorporate, and you have a conversation with the congregation about gathering new people, you could ask questions about greeting, not just greeters, but how empowered and formed are your ordinary congregants at saying hi to someone they don't know, or showing them what page they're on, or which color book they're supposed to be holding, and so forth. Actually, you guys probably don't worry about that. You just have the folder, right?
Right.
That's good, I think. Okay. So that's a performance index. The next one is around morale. Again, and I didn't say this yet, so not again. Around morale, if there's an asterisk, a tiny little asterisk next to the question number, MOR number 1, morale question number 1, a little asterisk means it was asked negatively. That is, you want them to not respond positively to that question. It seems to me we're just going through the motions of church activity. There isn't much excitement among our members. So you flatlined on that one, and you should have. That's good. That means it's high morale. Make sense? Okay. What do you see here? Yeah, lots of green lights around morale. People are hyped.
Yeah.
I walked in, it's January 11. Normal people don't go to church on January 11th, right? You know, the holidays are over, and I'm depressed because I just had my first full week back at work. I'm not going to church today. I'm going to go skiing, you know. I'm going to go snowboarding. But look, there's a bunch of people here, right? I mean, I just walked in, and there y'all were. I walked down into the parish hall, and I heard everybody singing, right? High morale, a lot of enthusiasm. There might be some anxiety there, you know, in the same way that I feel personal anxiety that, you know, the Seahawks are going to keep playing, and if they lose, it's going to be really bad, right? I have high morale as a citizen of this city about our football team, and I have anxiety about if it doesn't go well, right? It's going to go well.
Right.
Right? Of course it is. How dare I even say that, you know? So the morale is high, but there might be some agitation underneath that. That came out in a specific data point around pacing and timing of our transition. People are not patient about that, right? They want a new rector yesterday, right? Okay. Conflict management. Again, a couple of negative questions, negatively worded questions. So when you see those bars really short, that's a good sign. This is a congregation, and again, this makes sense. You're Magi in a way, like you're adaptable. You're ready to change stuff if you need to. Your ability to manage conflict and handle conflict is pretty high, pretty strong. You might want to ask questions about this a little bit. It might be that you're handling conflict by minimizing it or minimizing